Honourable Chris Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, does he stand by all of his government's statements and actions?
Yes, and especially the steps that we are taking to restore confidence in New Zealand's energy industry. New Zealand needs a rational energy policy, but instead previous governments spent years undermining private sector investment and creating the conditions for future shortages and pricing spikes. Now Kiwis are experiencing the consequences. This morning, Simeon Brown called on the gentailers to make clear that they must be competitive in the energy market. We're taking action to restore confidence in the energy sector and to enable investment. That means ending the ban on oil and gas. It means cancelling Lake Onslow. It means bringing in fast track to enable more investment, including renewables. And of course, it's all part of our plan to rebuild the economy and to make sure we have energy security.
Supplementary. Does his Minister of Trade's statement, "You're not in Mexico now, we don't do things like that here," and subsequent dismissal of concern, calling it friendly banter, reflect the standard of behaviour he expects from his ministers?
It was good to see the Minister withdraw and apologise that statement.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. Is he aware that the number one excuse invoked by the perpetrators of harassment in the workplace, be it racism, sexism or otherwise, is to excuse that behaviour as friendly banter? And if so, is that the type of workplace culture he is trying to create?
Well, I'll just say it's a bit rich coming from that member who this morning, just a few hours ago, was on Radio New Zealand exhorting the fact that everybody needs to watch their rhetoric, a message that I have played back over a number of months, and yet he has a former minister and a senior MP condoning putting up a video saying that I'm killing children. I don't think that's appropriate.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister
Points of
doesn't...
order are heard in silence.
Prime Minister doesn't have any responsibility for other members of Parliament. He does have responsibility for ministers in his government, and that was what my question was about. It was about a comment made by a minister in his government.
Yes, I think the Prime Minister was making a point, but I'll ask the Prime Minister to add to his answer.
As I've been saying, I'm asking all political leaders to watch their rhetoric.
Supplementary question. In that case, Mr Speaker, is his Minister of Foreign Affairs providing a running commentary on the gender of international athletes consistent with the standard of behaviour that he expects of his ministers?
Point of order. Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr Speaker, that claim and that question requires it to be authenticated. I have the post. It says nothing of the sort, and I expect him to get up now and apologise.
Well, the first point is supplementaries are seldom, if ever, able to be authenticated because they are part of an on-flow of discussion. However, if the Minister feels that he has been in some way impugned, then he has a right to reply. Do you want to do that? Or?
Mr Speaker, by way of my point of order, I've given you my reply. His questions based on drivel and nonsense repeated by Louisa Wall, who herself didn't bother to verify what she was writing about.
Does the Prime Minister want to add anything to that?
No.
Right Honourable Chris Hipkins.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order.
I asked the Prime Minister whether the statement made by the Minister of Foreign Affairs was consistent with the behaviour expected of his ministers. He hasn't even attempted to address or even reply to the question.
Yes, I know, but if the Minister has taken a point of order, taking exception to the question and the assertion of the question, he's got a right to reply to that under our standing orders. Yes. He has replied that it is not accurate, and therefore that has to be, as member's word has to be accepted.
Well, point of order, Mr Speaker. That doesn't mean the Prime Minister shouldn't then have to address the question.
Well, that's right, and I asked the question if he wished to, the Prime Minister if he wished to. His comment was no.
Well, point of order, Mr Speaker. Are you indicating that a Prime Minister simply can say he doesn't want to address the question? Because the only grounds on which a minister can say they're not going to address a question is if they don't believe it's in the public interest to do so.
Well, I'm assuming. Well, look, I'm not going to speak for the Prime Minister. I can assume that when the Prime Minister said that, he was imagining that since it had been denied, there wasn't a great deal of public interest in continuing. But I will ask the Prime Minister if he would like to respond.
Look, the Minister has denied it, but what I'd say is that Minister is doing an exceptionally good job as a Foreign Minister for New Zealand, and we should be incredibly proud of him because he is lifting the intensity and the urgency of our relationships across the Indo-Pacific like no one's done before.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. Does his Minister of Arts, Culture and Heritage's decision to remove Te Reo Māori from formal letters inviting an Australian minister who is a champion of Indigenous languages to New Zealand for Mātariki celebrations reflect the standard of behaviour that he expects from his ministers?
Well, I would just say to that member, we value Te Reo on this government. What I'd also say to that member is the correspondence was being directed to an Australian minister overseas. And what I'd say to you in my dealings with Australians, it always pays to be incredibly simple and clear and use English.
Supplementary. Good to see him leading by example. Supplementary.
Just wait. The member's own party just taking a little time to settle.
Supplementary question. Does his minister...
Just hang on. We'll just wait till the House is quiet. Now we're right.
Thank you. Does his Minister for Children's refusal to answer questions in the House last week, in preference to wearing an ACT Party badge, reflect the standard of behaviour he expects of his ministers?
I fully support our Minister of Children, Oranga Tamariki. She's doing a fantastic job. What I'd say to the member is, what a petty line of questions that we're seeing today. This is a country where our economy is in real trouble. This is a country where we cannot deliver health and education services as well as we need to, and we have rising levels of crime, and this is the line of questioning from the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you. Right, another outburst like that, and someone will, on a representative basis, take an early day. Who laughed then? Point of order. Right on with Chris.
Mr. Speaker, there's actually a serious question. It's the first time in the 16 years that I've been a Member of Parliament that a minister has refused to stand up whilst being in the House and answer a parliamentary question. That is the job of ministers, and I think the Prime Minister should be expected to address that question rather than do the very thing that he's been telling everyone else all week not to do and attack the questioner.
Point of order.
Point of order. Right, the Honourable David Seymour.
Speaking to the point of order, as a matter of technical fact, the Minister stood and sought a call to answer the question, but was forbidden under the conditions. So the member maybe hasn't been here long enough to learn all the rules, but the way he's characterising it is untrue.
Speaking to that point of order, Mr. Speaker, I'm very familiar with the rules, Mr. Speaker, and if the member had removed her badge and prioritised her ministerial responsibilities over wearing her ACT Party promotions, then she would have been able to answer that question. She chose to refuse to answer the question. That is a matter of ministerial conduct, and it is absolutely appropriate that the Prime Minister be questioned on that and asked to explain it.
That's right, and unfortunately I don't think it's the responsibility of the Prime Minister in that circumstance. That circumstance was entirely my responsibility. Does the member have another question?
To be clear, point of order, Mr. Speaker, I'm not questioning the ruling that you made. You are absolutely within your rights as Speaker to do so. The Minister's choice to not comply with your ruling and instead refuse to answer questions is absolutely a matter of ministerial conduct for which the Prime Minister is answerable. Not you as Speaker, the Prime Minister is answerable for that.
Yeah, and I'm not going to let the question go any further because this has been a matter that has been settled and I expect that the current compliance with the rules of the House will continue. Without losing a question...
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order.
You'll note that the opposition fully endorsed the position that you took last week. However, there are not two standards for ministers in this House. Ministers come under significant pressure, and the Minister was under significant pressure last week, and we respected the ruling that you made as the Speaker. That does not ever excuse ministers of the Crown from being held to the same standard as every other Minister of the Crown. Every Minister of the Crown reports to the Prime Minister. Their conduct is a matter for the Prime Minister to answer for. The question that I asked is completely within order. It does not in any way question the ruling that you made as the Speaker. It questions why a minister in his government prioritised promoting her political party over discharging her duties as a minister.
Ask the question one more time. Point of order.
Supplementary?
No, I've asked him to. I've called him.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Did his Minister for Children's refusal to answer questions in the House last week, in preference to wearing an ACT Party badge, reflect the standard of behaviour that he expects from his ministers?
No, the Speaker has addressed that question, I think, very well. There was challenges last week. He has reset the tone of this House, and we deal with that going forward.
The Honourable David Seymour.
Mr Prime Minister, what, in the view of this government, are the priorities of the New Zealand people? What do they need from the government and the Parliament right now?
Well, I thank the member for their question. What they want is a government that's going to rebuild the economy, restore law and order, and deliver better health and education. Those are the big issues that outside of this place New Zealanders are concerned about.
Well, supplementary question, if that's the case, why are his ministers prioritising wearing party badges over answering questions, making racial taunts against members of the other side of the House, providing a commentary on the gender of international athletes, Mr Speaker, and refusing to use Te Reo Māori in their correspondence?
Just a moment. There was considerable talk coming from the government side of the House while that question was being asked. The Honourable Chris Hipkins will ask it again.
Mr Speaker, if that is indeed the priorities of this government, why are his ministers refusing to answer questions in the House prioritising wearing party badges instead, making racial taunts to members on the opposite side of the House, refusing to use Te Reo Māori in their correspondence, promoting things like Matariki, refusing to providing a commentary on the gender of international athletes, and of course attacking the courts, which is something we haven't got to yet?
What I observe is I see a hard-working cabinet and a set of ministers that are actually doing the business for New Zealand. I look at our economic ministers who are actually reducing inflation, lowering the cost of living and making sure we've got a growth plan going forward. I look at our law and order ministers and I see them focused on lowering crime. I look at our education minister who did more in 6 hours and 6 days than that member did as education minister for 6 years. I look at what our health minister is doing to make sure that we improve our health outcomes for Māori, non-Māori and all New Zealanders. That's what I see.